Hi everybody, welcome to Pivotal Stories here at SpringOne Platform 2018. I'm Jeff Kelly, and my guest is Thomas Squeo, who is the CTO at Corp. Welcome.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. You're a return guest on the show, and we talked last year at SpringOne, so why don't you catch us up? What's been going on since the last time we chatted at West? Update us on your progress in terms of your transformation journey.
So when we last spoke, we were just finishing up our initial platform operations dojos. We had kind of set up the initial team, and then in January really kind of put the gas on the fire, if you will. We've been actually doing more app transformations, and those app transformations are both here in North America. We've got them happening in France, Mexico City, India, happening all over, and we've basically built out 3 teams. We've got the Pivotal Balance team, we've got the CNET or the Cloud-Native Enablement team, which is our own internal team, and then we have a relationship with Cognizant where they're actually working multiple pods so we can actually have more parallel coverage across the portfolio.
Okay. Well, you mentioned app transformation. Of course, West is a well-established, successful company. So coming into your transformation, you had a lot of existing applications. And so that brings up questions like, well, which applications do we modernize and refactor? Which ones do we just lift and shift to the new platform to get some of the benefits of automation? And even, which ones maybe do we retire? How do you think about making those kind of decisions? And you mentioned the app transformation work you've done with Pivotal. I think you did a dojo on that. Do you have kind of a decision matrix? How do you think about making those kind of decisions?
Well, I think that first and foremost, we got to look at what's its suitability to be on the platform. So is it a 12-factor app? What's the age of the application as well? Big item for us is like, what's going to be the impact to the portfolio? So just because the app can be transformed doesn't mean it's going to get to the front of the line. So really when we're looking at these, it's like, how do we actually drive value from an operations standpoint as well? So for example, if we're going to go and just kind of move the application over, effectiveness is kind of our first measure for kind of getting on the platform, and then efficiency afterwards. So the reason why we stood up our own internal Cloud-Native Enablement team is we wanted to be able to have internal staff that can actually dive much deeper into the application alongside those teams and be able to kind of optimize it to be on the platform. But really it's kind of like, I think our initial cut of our release planning was really around suitability to be on the platform. And then what we did is, as we kind of got a good understanding of what we were actually going to target, we started to look at impact to the portfolio. And that was really kind of the next layer of how we do that. And now we're actually getting to the point of when we're prioritizing resources that are going to go from through that process and go into production. So they've gone through their soak-in, they're now going there. What's going to eliminate the most amount of headaches for our operators?
Mm-hmm. So. And of course, all these applications are serving different business units. And how do you have those conversations about things you're going to do? Is it invisible or transparent to the business units, or are those conversations you have to have about what we're going to do with these applications?
So I think the biggest item around communication with the lines of business is really around what are the changes in behavior that we are going to require. So in Q3, Q4 last year, we moved from a holding company model to an operating company model, so we have some opportunities for integration we didn't have previously. So now it's looking at all of the segment presidents as stakeholders in this journey. So we need to make sure that they understand kind of what's going to change about the work, how it's going to be delivered, and what's ultimately going to be the benefit to them. Because if there's who benefits, what's the benefit, and why would they care? Those are all really key drivers. And the thing is that if you're going to go and say, look, you're going to go faster, you're going to be more scalable, stable, secure, and ultimately it's going to be more cost effective for the enterprise. I think that really drives value to our segment presidents.
And something you mentioned caught my ear: the Cloud-Native Enablement team. And I know that one of the things that our customers and large enterprises think about a lot is, how do I organize teams? Not just developer teams or balance teams, but other maybe new types of organizations or groups that can help shepherd through some of the transition. Talk about that unit a little bit more, the Cloud-Native Enablement team, and what's their real charter, and what type of people are part of that team?
Great question. And when we look at the disposition of those folks, we drew from our enterprise architecture team and then the tech leads across key aspects of the business. So what we're looking for is people that had real lean forward attitudes. They were agile by kind of their DNA, and they really kind of were excited about the engineering problem to solve alongside the team. So rather than really kind of looking at it as, oh, I have yet another task. It's like the people that really get excited about kind of, sharpening the saw, if you will, over and over again, being able to really kind of drive an engineering problem to what's the best solution for how it's actually going to be implemented. And what we've seen is that there's been kind of a virtuous byproduct is that we've started to now be able to identify the next tier of players that we're going to send either through PAL certification or make part of that Cloud-Native Enablement team, and how we actually ultimately look at that as kind of a career progression opportunity for rotating staff into that. Because what happens is we don't want to be in a situation where team members kind of stagnate in there and they become kind of an internal consultancy, because it does require some degree of travel to be able to execute this kind of stuff.
Right, absolutely. So turning a little bit more specifically to the technology, I understand West is an early user of PKS, the Pivotal Container Service. There's been a lot of talk at this conference about PKS and where it fits alongside the application service, Pivotal Application Service. Could you talk about your thoughts on PKS, why you're working with it, how you think about which workloads are going to run on PKS versus PAS, and maybe that relationship between the two?
So really there's kind of two key dimensions. Is one, if I need to be able to manage a monolith in a single container and have it be managed by PKS, that's an ideal candidate. So that gives us not only the ability to kind of look at a greater quantity of our estate, but it also gives us the ability now to look at things like, ultimately patch hygiene. You guys release a patch about every 6 days. It's part of the appliance, goes right in. That ultimately makes that from a risk and compliance standpoint that much more attractive to the organization. So when things like corporate audit or any kind of external compliance and regulatory agency kind of gets involved, and we have these environments where there's compartmentalized PCI vault for the application, that actually really reduces the amount of clutter in the conversation. What we want to be able to do is make the right way the easy way. So when we look at this, PKS is a way we can actually have teams move over without necessarily going through the complete re-engineering effort to be able to take advantage of PAS. But what we want to be able to do is also encourage those teams that want to see those applications kind of be part of our portfolio long into the future, where it makes sense, we'll actually move them over to PAS. What we're seeing is actually applications that are commingling PAS, PKS, and sometimes Kubernetes right on the public cloud. So that's based on what the design is necessary for that application, and sometimes you want to be able to have the teams make those decisions as close to the problem as possible, as opposed to from like a mandate of you shall be on PKS, because we don't approach it that way.
Got it. Of course, security is another hot topic at this conference and with all enterprises today. And so I understand you've really embraced this 3 R's approach to security that our Chief Security Officer, Justin Smith, talks a lot about. And really one of the key concepts behind that is going fast to remain secure, which to some can seem a little counterintuitive. Maybe the instinct is to kind of hunker down and don't change anything and kind of defend the perimeter. Talk about why speed is so important to staying safe in this kind of environment.
So I think it's actually, it's not just speed, it's also the grain size of what you're actually changing. So if you look at the notion of kind of large massed builds that happen on a semi-annual or annual basis being put out into production, what we start to see is that ultimately that threat surface is a lot larger. There's an ability for the more time between releases that allows a bad actor to kind of sit inside your system and be able to, undertake, their kind of activities and whatever their goals are. But what we want to be able to do is insulate our applications by viewing incremental releases. And by being able to do that, what we see is that by hardening the platform, and essentially as if you think about it from the OSI layer, we have to go all the way down to the physical equipment in the case of our own data centers, and basically layer 4 and above when we're talking about public IaaS. So what we're looking at is how do we actually eliminate the large grain size. So we really want to be able to make finer changes to the application so we can ultimately go faster. And what ends up happening is that by re-platforming or repaving those environments, what happens is that you start to be able to eliminate things that could exist out there. We've also embraced CredHub pretty aggressively, and what that does is it means that credentials are now checked out as opposed to on a post-it note on somebody's machine.
Right. It certainly sounds more secure than the post-it note. And you also mentioned making the right thing to do the easy thing to do for developers, and I think that applies certainly to security as well. Could you talk about how that applies to that function, to security, when it comes to developers?
Well, I think it's important. When we built out our platform operations team, our CISO has put team members right into that organization. And what's important about that is that we're now looking at what are the best behaviors, what are the ways in which we could actually make it just kind of baked into the platform. And by going through that process, that now gives application developers and application operators the ability to focus more deeply on those threat surfaces that are in their application, and then be able to kind of think, our ultimate goal is to be able to have almost like a white hat on every team that we can actually have, so they could actually, or a white hat rotating between the teams, so you could actually use security discipline as an opportunity for professional development as well.
Great. And so as we wrap up, what's on your agenda the next, say, 6, 12 months? What are some of your priorities? And let's say we're chatting on this stage in a year from now, what do you want to have accomplished?
Well, I think our reality is that to keep the momentum up, it requires a significant amount of change. So how do you actually ensure that people have the understanding of how they're going to get on the platform? So those early adopters, those early teams that have kind of gotten onto the platform, how do you ensure that they don't backslide into either other technology environments or so on and so forth? We want to be able to make sure that the needs are being met. And what is interesting is that the challenges that they faced before are now different. So you've eliminated a lot of the heartache of kind of the legacy, and now they're in this new platform, and they're now having new requirements. They're pushing us a lot harder, and we need to be very responsive. Our product engineering teams are our customer.
Right, absolutely. Well, fantastic. Well, Thomas, thanks so much for joining us again. Hopefully we can do this again and get
Excellent.
another update.
Thank you.
Thanks.